All right. Welcome in, everybody, to this deep dive where we're going to be asking a question that kind of feels like it's ripped right out of a spy thriller.
Right.
Is Syria a proxy war?
Ooh.
And we're going to be diving deep into two sources that offer kind of contrasting perspectives on the tangled web of alliances and conflicts that we see in the region.
Okay.
So one of the sources is a YouTube video featuring Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Okay.
Now, this guy, he doesn't mince words
All right.
when he's accusing the U.S. and Israel of kind of pulling strings to overthrow Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
And our second source is going to be a CBS News segment.
Okay.
And this one shines a light on Israel's military actions in Syria,
Interesting.
where they're targeting weapons that they claim could fall into the wrong hands.
I see.
So are we really witnessing like a carefully orchestrated power play?
Yeah.
Or is this a desperate scramble for security in a
Right.
totally chaotic situation?
Makes you wonder.
Let's find out.
All right. It's wild, right? Like how these two sources, they seem like they're on opposite sides of the story.
Totally.
But they actually say a lot about how each player is approaching this whole thing.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Let's start with Khamenei.
Okay.
I mean, this guy throws out some pretty serious accusations.
He does, yeah.
Claiming he has evidence of U.S. and Israeli involvement in the Syrian conflict.
Evidence, huh?
Yeah, but like, what's the strategy behind this kind of rhetoric?
I mean, do you think it's just bluster?
Yeah.
Or could there be something more going on here?
Well, I mean, what I thought was really interesting about this was that
Yeah.
he uses that phrase, "we have evidence," but he never actually tells us what that evidence is.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's classic.
Right. So what do you think is going on there?
Well, I think that tactic, it does a few things, right?
Okay.
First of all, it creates doubt, so suspicion.
Yeah.
And it's like aiming to undermine the U.S. and Israeli credibility on the international stage.
Yeah.
Like, are they trustworthy,
Right. It kind of makes you think twice.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And second, it plays right into this narrative
Yeah.
that Iran has been working on for a long time.
Okay.
This idea that they're constantly under threat from these external forces.
Right. Always the victim?
Kind of, yeah. And think about it on like a domestic level, right?
Sure. Yeah.
This kind of language
Yeah.
that can be super powerful.
Totally.
It's a way to rally support at home.
Yeah.
And it's used to justify Iran's actions in the region.
So it's not really about Syria at all, is it?
It's bigger than that, yeah.
It's about Iran's position in the whole Middle East.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Syria,
Yeah.
it's like this key piece of what Iran calls the axis of resistance.
Oh, interesting.
Which also includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, by the way.
Okay. I see.
And this alliance, it goes way back. It comes from this shared belief that they don't like Western influence.
Yeah.
And they oppose Israeli power in the region.
Right.
For Iran, Syria's more than just an ally. It's like a strategic linchpin,
I see.
It lets them project power across the Middle East.
Right.
And it's a way to support groups like Hezbollah.
So if we're talking about proxy wars,
Yeah.
I mean, Syria really does fit the bill here.
It does.
It's a stage where these larger ideological and geopolitical conflicts are playing out, on the ground.
For sure.
Yeah. And his message is definitely one of defiance, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
He keeps reinforcing this idea that despite pressure from the U.S. and Israel,
Right.
the resistance front is just getting stronger and it's expanding its reach.
Yeah, he even suggests that another neighboring country is involved in destabilizing Syria.
Interesting. Who does he say?
Doesn't say it outright,
Okay.
but it's probably Turkey.
Okay.
It's just adding fuel to the fire,
I mean, we know that Turkey has been supporting Syrian opposition groups, and they've also had their own clashes with Kurdish forces in northern Syria. It's like every single player in this region has their own set of interests and alliances, making this, incredibly complex to follow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is, and this is where it gets really interesting,
Okay.
Because while Khamenei is painting this picture of this huge conspiracy,
Right.
Israel's actions on the ground, they seem to be driven by something much more immediate.
Okay.
Security.
Security, right. Okay. So let's shift gears then to Israel.
Okay.
So the CBS News report highlights their military actions in Syria,
Yeah.
which are mainly focused on stopping advanced weapons from falling into the wrong hands.
Oh.
But in a conflict like this, that's
Yeah.
so chaotic, I mean,
Holy.
who are the right hands, you know?
That's the question.
It just feels like a really subjective judgment at the moment.
Yeah, it really is. But you have to remember something.
Right.
From Israel's perspective, any group that gets control of these weapons could be a potential threat.
Right.
Like Syrian rebels, Hezbollah, even like, I don't know, some more radical factions.
Right. Yeah.
They see themselves as being surrounded by hostile forces.
Right. Yeah.
And they're taking this like proactive approach
Yeah.
to deal with what they see as an existential threat.
And they're not messing around either, right?
No, they're not.
The report goes into detail about some of their targets.
Yeah.
Cruise missiles, fighter jets, surface-to-air missile systems.
Right.
I mean, they're basically trying to neutralize Syria's whole military.
Yeah, the types of weapons they're going after,
Yeah.
that tells you a lot about their strategy. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just about securing their borders.
Right.
It's about stopping those weapons from being used against them in the future.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the U.S.'s role in all of this?
Right?
They seem to be taking kind of a hands-off approach, mostly providing air traffic control because they've already got a military presence in the region.
Yeah.
But it's limited, right?
Yeah, and I think that limited involvement actually speaks volumes.
In what way?
Well, the U.S. is already really concerned about Iran's influence in the region, right?
Yeah.
And Hezbollah's growing arsenal.
Right.
The situation in Syria just makes things more complicated.
Absolutely.
Right. It's already a volatile situation.
Totally.
They got to be careful not to get pulled into an even bigger conflict.
Right. So they're walking a tightrope.
They are, for sure.
Really interesting. Wow.
It's a tough spot for the U.S.
Yeah.
They want to contain Iran, but they also don't want to get dragged into a full-blown war.
Right.
I think that really shows the difference in how everyone's approaching this.
Yeah.
Israel is all about the immediate threats.
Right.
And the U.S. is trying to manage this huge, complex geopolitical game.
And it's really interesting how both Iran and Israel are trying to control the story around what they're doing. You know, Khamenei is all about the strong words, accusations,
Yeah.
But Israel's focused on that threat of the weapons.
Right. The danger of those weapon systems.
Right. And they're saying, look, we have to do this to protect our people.
Exactly.
It's almost like two totally different styles of propaganda.
I know, right?
It really is. And I wonder how effective are those strategies?
I don't know. It's tough to say.
Yeah.
But it's clear that information or the lack of it is playing a huge role.
Yeah, I agree.
Khamenei makes claims, but no real proof.
Right.
And Israel only tells us what they want us to know.
Yeah, it makes it really hard to get the full picture.
It really does.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing.
Yeah, and then you throw in HTS.
Right, that main Syrian rebel group.
Oh, yeah, they're a whole other wild card.
They really are.
That's so uncertainty.
And they're complicated. Right.
They're super complicated.
They used to be with Al-Qaeda.
Right, but they say they're not anymore.
But we don't really know what they want.
It's murky.
It really is. And even the U.S. doesn't really talk to them.
Yeah, the CBS report said they have to rely on other people for information.
Wow. That's crazy.
I know. It shows how hard it is to work in a place where everything is changing all the time.
Right. The good guys and bad guys aren't so clear anymore. It's like everyone's working in the shadows, just trying to get what they want.
And the rules are changing all the time.
Yeah. So where does that leave us?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway here is that Syria is like a miniature version of all the power struggles happening in the Middle East.
Right.
It's a battleground for ideologies, ambitions, security concerns.
And everyone's doing their own thing.
Yeah, in this really complicated and often contradictory way.
So back to our original question.
Yeah.
Is it a proxy war?
I mean, it's definitely more than just a civil war.
Oh, okay.
You've got all these outside powers giving support to different groups.
Right.
They all want to control the outcome.
So in a way, yeah, it is a proxy war.
Yeah, it's where those bigger battles are being fought.
But we can't forget about the people caught in the middle.
Absolutely not.
Millions of Syrians whose lives have been destroyed.
It's a good reminder that war has a real human cost.
It really does.
And it's not easy to find solutions.
So we've talked a lot about the players, their motives, all that. But what does it all mean for our listeners?
Well, I think the key is to stay informed, but also be critical of what you're hearing.
That's good advice.
Don't just believe one side of the story.
Right.
Look for evidence. Consider all the different perspectives.
Yeah.
And try to understand why everyone's doing what they're doing.
It's like being a detective.
Kinda, yeah.
You got to piece it all together.
Exactly.
Especially when information is hard to find.
Exactly.
Or when people are hiding things.
Yeah. You have to think critically.
Be aware of our own biases.
Yeah.
Question what we think we know.
And find different sources of information.
So many different sources.
Yeah, to get the whole picture.
Yeah, and remember, this is constantly changing.
Oh, yeah.
What's true today might not be true tomorrow.
It's true.
The alliances, the stories, the power, everything's moving.
It's all in flux.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what should we be watching for?
I think we need to pay attention to how Iran, Israel, the U.S., Russia, Turkey.
Right, all the big players.
Yeah, how they change their strategies as things happen.
That makes sense.
They're all trying to win this incredibly complex game.
Right.
And their actions will have a big impact.
On the whole region.
Yeah, it's like a giant game of Risk.
I like that analogy.
With really high stakes.
Oh, and we can't forget that these aren't just moves on a board.
No.
They have real consequences with the people in Syria.
They're the ones who suffer.
Yeah. It's a heavy thought.
It is.
But it's the reality.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the politics and the strategies.
But the human cost is real.
It is.
So important to remember that.
For sure. Yeah, and it's easy to forget that there are real people behind all of this.
Yeah, real people with lives and families.
Exactly.
Caught in the middle of this.
And their lives have been completely turned upside down.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It really is.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into Syria, what's like the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's that there are no easy answers here.
Yeah, there's no quick fix.
It's a situation that needs our attention and our careful thought.
And empathy, right?
Yes, definitely empathy.
We need to stay informed.
For sure.
Stay engaged.
And be willing to question what we're told.
Yeah, don't just take things at face value.
Exactly. Look deeper.
Such good advice.
I hope so.
Well, to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of what's going on in Syria.
It's a complex situation.
It really is, and it's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, the more we understand it, the better we can respond to it.
Exactly. So stay curious.
Stay informed.
And keep asking those tough questions.
Until next time.
We'll see you then.